This is a Candy Factory Mini. So you want to write a book? With Suzette Mullen.
Hello, I'm Suzette Mullen, book coach, nonfiction writer, and your host. Welcome to So You Want to Write a Book. My goal is to break down the challenging process of finding and getting clear on your story so you can finally take action on the book that's been rattling around your head or tugging at your heart. Even if you never plan to write a book, I'll share tips that will help you become a more informed reader and a more effective writer in your work life. Questions, email them to me at hello@yourstoryfinder.com or feel free to comment in the post and I'll get back to you. So go ahead and grab a pen and paper, your phone or laptop to jot down some notes. And let's get started. Today we're talking about feedback for writers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we'll talk about the main reasons why writers seek feedback, the best and worst times to get feedback, what useful feedback looks like, and what it doesn't look like. Now, writing a book is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And the truth is writers are more likely to get to mile 26.2 if they're not going it alone. They're also more likely to produce a quality book with feedback from other writers or writing professionals. Now, I've been sitting my butt in a chair to write consistently since 2012 and less consistently since I was a teenager. I've received feedback at writers' conferences and writing groups from peers, from book coaches, and now I'm a book coach who provides feedback to individuals writing memoir and other nonfiction. Let me share what I've learned from my own writing and coaching journeys. So why do writers seek feedback in the first place? Well, in my experience, writers seek feedback for two primary reasons. The first and most fundamental is they want to know, is this any good? The second is they know they're stuck, they know their book's not working, but they don't know why and they don't know how to fix it. So let's dig into both of these reasons. Is this any good? This is definitely a valid reason to ask for feedback. Writing can be a very solitary pursuit. And if we're writing in a vacuum, it's difficult to have perspective. And frankly, in my opinion, it's difficult to have perspective on your own work, period. I can't tell you how many times I've sent pages to a book coach or shared pages with a writing group where I was like, these pages suck. And the feedback turned out to be pretty positive. And the reverse has certainly happened to me as well. So is this any good? It's valuable to get an outside perspective. But here's something I want to caution you about with this, is this any good reason? Do you really want to know? Or are you simply looking for validation? As a book coach, one of the things that kills me is when someone spends a good chunk of change on a manuscript evaluation only to be irritated or annoyed to hear that their manuscript still requires a lot of work. So before you send someone your pages, get real. Ask yourself, do I really want to know if they're any good? Will I be crushed if the reader isn't in love with my pages? If you just want validation, give your pages to your best friend, your mom, your spouse. They'll probably love whatever you write. If you really want the answer, here's what I recommend. First, reframe your question from, is this any good, to, are these pages working? And if not, why not? I would never tell a writer that their pages aren't any good, even if I felt that way. What I do as a book coach is I first find the positive in the pages. There's always something positive. Writing is a vulnerable act and sharing your work is vulnerable as well. And while my goal is not to give writers false hope, I also don't want to crush their spirit. I want to help them move forward. After sharing something positive, I outline the big picture concerns I have. I give them specific examples of where these concerns show up in the pages, and I offer a path forward, either in a coaching call or an editorial letter. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk to you some more about what helpful feedback looks like and what's not so helpful. But let's get back to that second reason writers seek feedback, that they know their pages aren't working. They either instinctively know, they've heard this from people they've shared their pages with, or perhaps they're querying agents and they're not getting any positive responses. These are writers who are ready to roll up their sleeves and do the work. They realize that writing means rewriting and revising until they get it right. These are the writers I love to work with as a book coach. And I'm one of those writers too. In fact, I've recently asked for more feedback on my query letter and opening pages of my memoir, since I've received 4 polite no's from agents and radio silence from others. I knew something wasn't working, but I wasn't sure what it was. I needed another set of eyes I trusted on my pages, and I got feedback, and now I still have a lot of work ahead of me, which on the one hand is disappointing, but on the other hand, I know what I need to do, which is exciting. So when are the best and worst times to seek feedback on your pages? If you're on a limited budget, the absolute best time to get professional help is at the very beginning of your project. In my introductory coaching package, Find Your Story, I help writers sort through their ideas and land on the single story they want to write now. And then I help them get clear on structure, audience, and how to position their books so they can write forward with confidence. So get help on getting clarity on what you've come to the page to say, how you're going to say it, and then you can write efficiently instead of spinning your wheels or writing in circles. If you do this first, you'll save yourself time, money, and heartache of having to start all over. And the other best time to get feedback is when you've completed your first draft. Ideally, you'll get what's known as a developmental edit from a professional editor or book coach. This will look at the big picture of your manuscript. So since I coach nonfiction writers, when I'm looking at a memoir manuscript, I'm looking at the big picture like narrative arc, and I'm looking at is the writer showing and telling, not just telling. And I'm looking to see if the reader's anchored in time and place. In prescriptive nonfiction how-to books, I'm looking more at the message, and I'm looking more at whether it's a clear path of transformation for the reader. So with the developmental edit of an entire manuscript, you, the writer, will then revise your manuscript before you query or self-publish. And you'll also need to get a copy edit or a proofread before you go to press. That's a lot, I know. So let's just review. The best times to ask for feedback are at the very beginning and when you have a complete manuscript before you pitch to agents or self-publish. So when's a bad time to ask for feedback? Well, in my opinion, there's no absolute rules about when you shouldn't ask for feedback, but there's signs that asking for feedback is not serving you well. What if you've done the work of getting clear on your story and your structure, but instead of writing forward, you keep asking for help that makes you more confused, not less? Or you're rewriting chapter 1 over and over again, each time taking in someone else's feedback instead of trusting yourself and writing forward. This is a common trap to fall into when you're in a writing group and you're getting feedback, sometimes conflicting feedback from multiple people. Or you're looking to others to solve the problems in your pages or answer the questions in your writing that only you can answer. Or you're seeking feedback as a crutch or a procrastination tactic instead of doing the hard work of writing forward yourself. To be clear, many writers write forward successfully with a book coach or writing group or critique partner by their side. Just be aware of why you're seeking the feedback and ask yourself if it's helping you move forward or not. Once upon a time, I was one of those writers who rewrote chapter 1 over and over again in response to feedback from a writer's group. Unwittingly, I found myself writing to try and please certain members of the group. Let's just say this was not productive. Eventually, I pulled back from the group, I worked one-on-one with a book coach, and I completed my draft. So now let's talk about what kind of feedback is useful and what isn't. Useful feedback is specific. It points a way forward. It asks questions of the writer to help the writer solve the problem or address the concern. It discusses what's on the page, not the writer's life choices. What's not useful? I loved it, or it didn't work for me. Vagueness in either direction isn't helpful at all. I would have done it this way. It's not useful to hear how another writer would have written your book. Remember, it's your book, not theirs. So how do you ensure you get useful feedback? If you're working with a professional, ask them directly about what kind of feedback they give. Sometimes they may offer a sample edit or share a sample of some other edits they've done to show you the kind of feedback they give. If you're seeking feedback from a critique partner or writing group or a beta reader, that's someone who's your ideal reader, who's reading your entire manuscript before you pitch it to agents or self-publish. Be very clear about the kind of feedback you're looking for and what you're not looking for. When I sent my memoir manuscript to beta readers, I gave them specific written instructions about the kind of feedback I was looking for. Places where they were confused, where they wanted more information or less, where they were bored or felt like the story dragged, places where they cringed. I also told them what I was not looking for. I wasn't looking for a copy edit or nitpicks on grammar. So one final point on feedback, you have to know when enough is enough. You have to know when it's time for you to get your work out into the world or put it in a drawer. This may be the toughest call at all. I know what that feels like. I'm there right now. I thought my memoir manuscript was ready. I'd received lots of feedback. I'd worked really hard to revise the manuscript and draft a book proposal. But then, when I wasn't getting any bites from agents, I went for more feedback. And part of me is in that kind of like, I'm never going to get my book out into the world. But the other part of me is saying, yes, I will. And I'm mapping out a revision plan and a timeline, and I will get this book out into the world. I will reach a point where I say, this is good enough, not, is this New York Times bestseller quality? The good enough manuscript. I'll get there with the help of useful feedback from my book coach. Stay tuned for more on my memoir journey. So the key takeaways I want to leave you with today are, writers write better books with feedback. Get real with yourself about why you're seeking feedback. Do you want to make your book better, or are you just looking for an attaboy or an attagirl? If your budget's limited for professional help, use your dollars up front to get clear on your idea and plan your structure. That's the best bang for your buck. Beware of getting caught in a feedback loop. Is the feedback you're receiving helping you move forward or getting you more confused? Don't be shy about asking for the kind of feedback you need. And remember, writing a book is a marathon, not a sprint. Pick your moments to get productive feedback so you can finish your book, pronounce it good enough, and get it out into the world in your lifetime. So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation about feedback, and I'd love to continue it with you. I invite you to go to my website, yourstoryfinder.com, sign up for my newsletter, which is chock full of tips to help writers get started, get unstuck, and get their stories out into the world. You can also find my blog on my website, where you'll find additional tips that'll help you move forward in your writing journey. Check out the post Writers Write Better with Support to hear more about different kinds of editorial support for writers. Next time, we're going to have some fun comparing the journey of publishing a book with the process of applying to college. If you remember making a list of reach, likely, and safety schools, or helping your team come up with that list, you won't want to miss this one. In the meantime, happy reading and writing. So You Want to Write a Book is part of the Candy Factory mini-series and is a proud member of the Candy Factory Collective.
Over the past 8 years, Suzette has been on a mission to help writers clear the fog and cut through the overwhelm so they can move their ideas out of their head and onto the page.
Visit yourstoryfinder.com to learn more about Suzette as well as her writing coach offerings.
So You Want to Write a Book is produced by the Candy Factory Collective for So Good Lancaster, another great project of the Candy Factory Co-working in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The show is produced by Ann Kirby with production support by Anna Tran and Jason Mundock. Administrative support by Ariana Henderson. Find out what makes Lancaster so good at sogoodlancaster.com.
Candy Factory.
Collective.